Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops in Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise.
And all right, we've already got a comment here. It was what we were going to open up with the show with anyway, so I'm just going to pull it up. This is from our YouTube user. Now, full disclosure, I did not get to watch this game, so I'm kind of looking forward to Blake's recap of what happened. But YouTube user says Team USA made it dramatic today. He doesn't understand the Bam Adebayo minutes. He's been pretty invisible to him. Maybe so, but I know they were playing Serbia. Did the Joker just go off? What on earth happened this afternoon that's got everyone so in a twist?
I mean, yeah, obviously you need to plan for Jokic. He had 17 points, 11 assists, 5 boards. But overall, to me, so I had a work meeting in the first quarter, so I missed Steph Curry go off for 17 points in the first quarter. But when I kicked the game on, Serbia was pretty much just out of their minds from three. And I mean, the combination, like I agree with YouTube user, in the second half, there was a time where like Bam was on the floor. I believe Bam and AD together, like Bobby Bucket said, and Bam took a corner three. And I was just like, what are we doing here? But honestly, one of the all-time comebacks, the US was down 17, and then Embiid, Steph, LeBron, KD just put everything on their back. And I mean, Embiid set this crazy screen for Steph to pop open for three, and I thought it was one of the just a really great screen. Like if only they put screen assists in the box score and everything. But yeah, super exciting game. There were so many times in it where I was like, if this was any other team, I would count them out. But you kind of have to feel with this roster, they're never really out of a game, even though they should have been, honestly. It's hard to believe they came back. Bogdan Bogdanovic had a good game. He went off for 20 points, and Melo was sitting courtside with his son, and Bogdanovic, after he made a three, did like the 3 fingers to the head Melo celebration at him. So it was fun. It was exciting. I mean, that KD, LeBron, and Steph trio is just unbelievable. Like, we're lucky to watch it. Wes, you have to go back and rewatch when you have a time, because it's like the best international game I can remember watching in recent memory.
Definitely that. I'm going to have to go back and get the replay on Peacock. I'm sure I could find it. But okay, so Bobby Buckets brings up the Bam Adebayo and Anthony Davis front court. Is Serbia just big? Like, do they have a really big power forward that they play next to the Joker that would require that? Or is that something that's been going on this whole time? Because I watched 2 of the early games, and I don't remember seeing much of that.
So the weird thing to me about that is, and again, I missed the first quarter and was like working on the side, but when Bam and AD were on the court together, like Jokic was in foul trouble. Like, he was playing for 4 fouls pretty much the whole second half. So it just made no sense. Like, yes, they needed size on the court to help stop Jokic, but when Jokic is on the bench, like, why was that lineup out there? So that didn't really make sense to me. Serbia did have one other big man who was getting some good minutes in, especially towards the end. I can't remember his name exactly, but Team USA, like, they struggled to grab a defensive rebound down the stretch. Like, I thought that was going to be what sealed it for them, but luckily they were able to pull it out. And I mean, especially Kevin Durant had some really solid defensive plays, but yeah, size was definitely a thing, but I don't know. The Bam AD thing just didn't make sense to me, especially when Jokic was off the floor.
So just, listening to all this, what it kind of reminds me of is when the big 3 were in Miami, and that team was just so good, so star-studded, right? And they just, the few times I remember the Pistons playing with them, and they did this against a lot of bad teams as well, but they just toy with them for three quarters, kind of be unserious, do whatever the heck they wanted. And then all of a sudden in the fourth, when it mattered, they'd really turn it up. And all of a sudden the shots that the Pistons were making or another bad team was making, they just weren't going in anymore. And then here come the Heat. Just from, a high level, because I didn't get to watch. Now I'm excited to go back and rewatch it. It almost sounds like the same thing, though on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, and I mean, Dwayne Wade and Noah Eagle have been like so good on the call throughout the whole Olympics, but Team USA was down in the first half, and Dwayne Wade was saying if they can get it, like in the first half, he was like, you just need to build upon some confidence because there wasn't much happening besides Serbia was shooting it really well for the floor. And then down the stretch, he was saying like, if you can just get into that like 5-6 point deficit range, like they should be good. But it felt even bigger than that to me. Like there was just something about what Serbia was doing, who was on the court for USA, that they were having a really hard time putting up with it. And I still am just so blown away that they found a way to come back and win that game. Cause I would love to look at the like win probability graph for this game, because to me, it came to a point where I was like, how are they going to come back from this lead? And they somehow did. Serbia got fairly cold at the wrong time, and there were some big shots made from Steph, KD, LeBron, and Embiid made some big plays, and they found a way to win it. It was just really incredible.
One of these years, Blake, the Team USA is going to lose and go to the silver medal or the bronze medal game, something like that. I guess it'll be the bronze medal game. They go to the bronze medal game. They'll probably win bronze. But one of these years, that's going to happen. And I'm nervous. I'm scared about what they're going to name the next team after that. We've already got the Dream Team. Then after that, you had the Redeem Team, right? When that was 2008, right? After the whole Manu thing. So what's it going to be next? There's going to be, I think we're out of nicknames, and I don't know what they're going to do.
I'm not creative enough to come up with that. Yeah, you're right. What do they have left? Does this team have a name? If they do, I'm definitely not aware of it.
Oh, no. You only get names when you're on a mission, and they are not on a mission right now. They've been gold medals for the past 2 or 3, right? Maybe even more than that. Time is weird. I can't remember.
I think they've either won 5 in a row or they're going for 5 in a row. So
yeah, they don't have a name. You have to lose, and by lose for Team USA, that's bronze. So you have to get bronze and then come back 4 years later, and now you get a name. But in the comments, if you guys know what to name that team, please, we need to know.
Yeah,
because I have no ideas.
Honestly, I feel like this team, like I've sort of had this thought that I don't know if this team is going to win gold, but I think the talent is just so immense that, I mean, now they have Wembanyama and the French team in the gold medal game, which isn't going to be easy, especially playing the home country. But yeah, just even in the exhibitions, like South Sudan gave them a run for their money, and that was a good team, but nowhere near the talent level of this Team USA, especially getting LeBron, KD, and Curry together. I feel like there could be some sort of name floated to them, but yeah, you're right. It's not the same as those situations in the past.
So they're playing France, right? Last thing on the Olympic basketball here. They're playing France next. That's the gold medal game. Is Wemby going to give them trouble? I mean, I'm sure we're going to see more of those Bam AD minutes that Bobby Buckets is a little nervous about.
Yeah, I mean, probably. Like Wemby was 0 for 5 or 6 from 3 today, and then he made a big shot in the fourth quarter. And I mean, that was a really good game between them and Germany too. Like it was a 2-point game with 30 or 40 seconds left. And Wes, if you have the time, you should go back and watch that one too. Gershon Yabusele like went crazy, and that's just like a blast.
Former Celtic legend.
Yeah, he's had a couple of good games in a row, and even Evan Fournier didn't do a ton today. He made a big shot, but he had a good last game too. I don't know. I just think because of the fact that they haven't seen Team USA yet, and vice versa, and France is playing at home, it'll be an interesting one. I don't think it'll be easy by any means. I mean, Team USA should win, but I don't think they're going to coast to the gold either. That said, this win today against Serbia was the signature win. Like, if they come back and lose, that would be such a disappointment.
Absolutely. All right, let's do this one more Olympics topic, because we got this question from Blue Post in the comments. It says, if Bobby Klitman makes the team, which he will make the team. The question is whether he makes the rotation, but he's going to be on the team. So because of that, will the Swedish connection turn Mondo Duplantis into a Pistons fan? And I had to Google who this guy was. Pole vaulter, right?
Yes, he's like the best pole vaulter ever, pretty much. And he competed, I think it was a couple days ago. And I guess how pole vaulting works, I was learning this in real time, as like on the Gold Zone on Peacock, they were explaining it. So in pole vaulting, as the bar is getting higher, the competitors can choose to not compete until it's high enough where they're like, okay, I'm gonna go for it. And this Duplantis was just pretty much chilling for most of the event. Like, there's a video of him like laying down, just waiting for his turn, and he wins gold easily. The competition's over, and then he's like, no, I want to keep going. He tells him to raise the bar. He wants to go for the world record. You get 3 tries at each height, and you have to like make it once to go on. So he's like hyping up the crowd and everything. It's really exciting. He misses his first 2 tries. He does it on the 3rd try and then just goes absolutely crazy. I don't know the full background. Like, I don't know if he lived in the US for most of his life, but he went to LSU. I think one of his parents is Swedish and the other is American. So he's competing for Sweden. So, hey, like, if Bobby's on the team, like, Duplantis is pretty much a legend. So if he's a Pistons fan, I would think it would be pretty cool.
You've just given me now like 3 Olympic events I need to go back and watch, because that sounds electric.
It was
winning gold and going,
exciting.
no, raise it again.
It was so exciting. I mean, they're like in the Olympics, I feel like there have been different things. Like, there was the men's US gymnastics team like winning a medal for the first time in forever. And I was like, that's so exciting. And then Noah Lyles wins the 100-meter. That was exciting. And then this Duplantis pole vault thing happened. I was like, that's exciting. And then we had this game today. There's been a ton of exciting stuff. So yeah, I would recommend like finding it on YouTube and catching up with it. It was like watching Duplantis just run wild after he made it over the bar on his last try was one of the most exciting things like I remember watching in a while.
And we got to add on to that Simone Biles basically jumping over an entire regulation basketball hoop on the floor routine. That was nuts. Oh my God. Gymnastics is so fun to watch. Yeah. It's incredible what those girls can do.
I know.
And guys.
Luckily, we're in like the basketball finals and like the U.S. women's team. I believe they play in the semis tomorrow, so they should win gold too. Hopefully they do. But all the other events have been so exciting too. Like, once the Olympics are fully over, I guess it'll be football season. We were talking about it earlier. We have a Lions preseason game on tonight. Recording this on Thursday. But I'll be able to shift much more of my attention to basketball because the Olympics has been super exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bobby Buckets, you're right. Cade Cunningham, Olympics, Team USA 2028. Book it. I think it's happening. Let's go.
Hopefully Tyrese Halliburton is actually playing that time too, because he is pretty much, I mean, he's gotten in for a few minutes, but not a super big role. So it's kind of like hey, you're going to be on this team in the future, like come along for the ride. But yeah, when LeBron, KD, and Steph are gone, it's going to be interesting what the roster looks like. And I mean, I think Cade should be on it too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that'll be exciting to watch. All right, so let's get into some Pistons questions now. We got this one from at Malu Viper 33 on Twitter. This one is directed at you, Blake. So last week you mentioned just kind of offhand that you thought Ron Holland could be a better fit with Cade Cunningham than Jaylen Ivey. He wants to know why you think Holland would be that better fit. Either right now, eventually, however you want to take it, however you meant it last week. But go ahead, hop on the soapbox. What do you got?
Yeah, so it boils down to two things for me. And I think the question from Malu Viper, sorry if I'm butchering that too, mention how Ivy is a better shooter than Holland right now, which is a fact. And Jaden Ivey might always be a better shooter than Ron Holland. But for me, why I think that's the case is for a couple reasons. The first being that I think Ivy, he doesn't need a ton of on-ball juice, but I feel like he needs a little bit more than Ron Holland does. I guess it's just not clear if Cade and Ivy are a true fit. Like Jaden Ivey, what he does offensively specifically is great and valuable for the Pistons, excuse me, and really any team. But the second thing, which is bigger for me, is just defensively. Jaden Ivey isn't a good defender right now. We don't know what he'll turn into, but I just don't think he'll ever be I guess I'll say a good defender in the NBA, which isn't meant as a slight to him by any means. I think Ron Holland, although he's not a proven defender right now, I think he has the potential to be that good defender. And if, say, Cade Cunningham and Ron Holland is your backcourt, or there's another guard in between them that's serving more in that catch and shoot role, spacing the floor for Cade, I think Ron can take the toughest defensive assignment on the other end better than Jaden Ivey can, which takes that pressure off of Cade. And although Holland was primarily on ball in the G League last year, I don't think he necessarily needs to be. Like, I don't think that's what his role will be in the NBA, maybe ever in his career. I think he can be that secondary guy that can cut towards the rim, make plays at the hoop, get out quick in transition. But really, like, what it boils down to me is their potential defensively, and maybe they all fit together. I don't really think that that's the case, but I don't know. I just think what Holland can be as a defender outweighs like what Ivy brings, and not saying like you have to give up on Jaden Ivey because of that. I just think in 3-4 years, whatever it might be, Holland might be a better fit next to Cade compared to Ivy, just because you don't want that much pressure on Cade defensively.
I'm going to challenge you just for a moment. What, in your mind, would be the ideal or perfect archetype of player for a guard next to Cade Cunningham? Just in your book.
Yeah, so I think offensively, like you could make an argument that it's what Jaden Ivey does. I mean, super quick, can get to the hoop, everything like that. But I just think like Jaden Ivey needs the ball in his hands a little more than what might be available. And I think in this upcoming season, we'll see him play next to Cade. We'll see him play in the second unit where he can run it more on its own. But in an ideal world, I think it's a quick guard who is a good decision maker, that is also able to be like a catch and shoot threat that Cade can kick out to when he's driving as well. Ivy can be that, and I know that we've knocked on Ivy a bit for his shooting, and he's not like a horrible shooter by any means. I think he's an average shooter right now, but if you can get someone in that above average that can shoot like 38-39% from three and have some like driving ability and touch near the hoop, but more importantly is at least like a solid defender to help take that away from Cade on the other end of the floor wherever possible.
Yeah, and Bobby Buckets brings up a Drew Holiday type, which I think is almost spot on to what you're describing. And I would agree with that. Yeah, Derek White, another great one. Of course, Boston has them both. Lucky them.
And Team USA.
And Team USA has them both. That's right. Yeah, Derek White with the late edition. I keep forgetting. Yes, so obviously I think defense, for the conversation right now that I want to bring up, you kind of just have to throw it away because you're right. Jaylen Ivey's not a great defender. He's not even a good defender. I think maybe one day he could be, slightly below average to just average on defense, but he's got a ways to go there. So purely speaking offensively, I'm not sure if there are too many archetypes that would be better than what Jaylen Ivey's going to bring. If you look at what Cade's weaknesses are and what a guy like Cade Cunningham or a guy like Cade Cunningham probably views himself as needs next to him. So, you're thinking Luka, Tatum, those types of guys. He needs a secondary ball handler. He needs a secondary playmaker, and he needs a guy who can kind of cover his butt when teams are sending way too much his way. Jaylen Ivey's going to do that. He gets to the rim very easily, much easier than Cade can out of isolation because he's so fast, because he's so explosive. He's very good in transition. And he could really punish you if a defense overhelps like this. So if you send a double team to Cade Cunningham, Jaylen Ivey can't shoot as well as you'd like right now, but he does shoot well enough to get closeouts. And because of that, he runs right by you. The defender, that is, he runs right by the defender. So I think offensively, you kind of have to ignore what Monty Williams did with him last season. If that's the type of role we're going to see Jaylen Ivey forced into when he's next to Cade, I don't think this is going to work for very much longer. You got to go back to Purdue. And when he was at Purdue, he was never purely the on-ball guy. He was kind of that a point guard in the sense that Allen Iverson was a point guard. He had the ball a bit, but every time he touched it, it was go, 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 attack, attack, attack. He was never probing. He was never trying to play that mid-range area to get plays open for other people. It was just get to the rim, make a decision fast, play out of that scramble that he initiated. And I think that fits really well next to Cade. That's why I was so excited about the pick back in the day. That's why I'm so excited that JB Bickerstaff is talking about these things now with Jaylen Ivey. So here's the question I wanted to ask you, because right now there's no question Jaylen Ivey's a better fit next to Ron Holland. It's not because of anything long-term. It's purely that Ron Holland is a rookie and seems to be very raw. So right now, today, Jaylen Ivey's the better fit. You were obviously talking long-term, right? So if both of these guys hit their ceiling, hypothetically, I'm curious which one of these two stat lines you would prefer next to Cade as kind of maybe as a number two, or maybe just as an additional star that's offering up support. So your first option is 27 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 2 assists, slashing 47, 34, 80, and solid being slightly above average defense. The second option, 23 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, slashing 45, 38, and 80. And this one would be slightly below average defense. So of those two stat lines, which would you rather be putting next to Cade?
It's tough, but I think I just lean to the slightly better scorer that's a better defender. Like, really, like, I don't want to have a average / below average off guard next to Cade, but at the same time, I think just having a plus defender next to him will help with so much. And Also, like 34% isn't what we want, but it isn't like having a Assar Thompson or what Ron Holland is out there purely as a 3-point shooter next to him. So I think I'd lean that way. And also, if a player is getting 27 points a game next to Cade Cunningham, you have to think that Cade is helping create a lot of those baskets, which I think might be where we see a good amount of improvement from him. Like we already have seen that he's a good playmaker for his teammates, but I think he can grow even more. So if he has a guy that can help him do that, while being average on three, but helping him out on defense, I would lean toward that player just a bit.
So I agree with you, and I agreed with you last week too. I was just kind of pushing you a little bit because I like Jaylen Ivey, but no, I'm with you. So to be clear here, number one player A, that would be Ron Holland if everything absolutely breaks right. That was loosely pulled out of an amalgamation of Jaylen Brown and DeMar DeRozan. And then player two would be Jaden Ivey, player B. So Bobby Buckets says player B. Bobby Buckets, you picked Jaden Ivey. And that was just kind of escalating what Jaden Ivey's done for the past couple of seasons and improving some percentages here and there to get him to those levels. So I think it just kind of hinges on what you would rather have next to Cade. If you really want scoring and defense, pure and simple, then the ceiling of Ron Holland should really excite you as your number two guy. I'm not sure Jaden Ivey can actually be a number two guy, but if you want a guy who's a secondary playmaker, who can get others involved, and who probably is going to end up a better shooter than Ron Holland. So if shooting and playmaking is what you would rather have, with still plus scoring, I mean, 22, 23 points per game, that's not nothing. But if you would rather have that playmaking and that shooting, then I think you're probably picking Jaden Ivey long term. It's a really interesting question. I'm with you. I lean Ron Holland. I think I have concerns still about getting Cade up in volume as a scorer to being over 25, 26 a night. I think, when you look at the championship level or even conference final level teams, they usually have a guy that averages above 25. And I don't think Cade could really do that. I don't know if I want Cade doing that with how good of a playmaker he is. I worry about Jaden getting there because he seems to have a playmaker mindset as well. Ron Holland goes and gets buckets. So if things swing right for Ron, I think he might get there. And personally, that's why I agree with you a little bit. Not a little bit, but that's why I agree with you in picking long term the ceiling of Ron Holland over a guy like Jaden.
Man, you almost got me with the blind resumes. Those are always very fun, but. Yeah, YouTube user brings up here is interesting too. Like if people are worried about Ivey's decision making, they should be terrified of the ball in Ron's hands. I agree with that. I'm hoping that we see eventually, like probably not in his rookie season, but eventually I hope how we see Ron Holland used is similar to what JB Bickerstaff is talking about, how he wants to use Jaden Ivey, ironically, like moving off the ball, trying to get the ball in his hands in motion, allowing him to get downhill. I mean, there's a ton that needs to happen to see that eventually come to fruition for Holland, but I think it's possible. And yeah, like also another thing that YouTube user brings up is how he thinks that Ron's a more natural two. How he thinks he's like a more natural two and more of a wing. I agree with that too. Like, I don't know if there's a world where you're starting Cade, Ivey, and Ron eventually. It also makes like you have to eventually commit to some of these guys long term. You can't do it for all of them. So I do see Ron in that two spot eventually. You want to see him improve as a shooter, but I think especially if you're looking at what he does on defense, I think he could be sort of in the range of what we're looking at as that ideal fit next to Cade, but he also needs to improve his perimeter shot as well and hopefully at least get it to that league average level.
Yeah, I'll disagree a little bit there. Only that I'm with YouTube user. I think he's more of a wing than a guard, and I would really like to have a guard next to Cade in the backcourt just to take some of that ball handling pressure away. But regardless, I really like the potential that Ron Holland has. Whether or not he's going to get there, who knows? But MimC313 brings up a good question here. And basically, if Ron Holland turns into this guy we're talking about, turns into a stud, what does that mean for Assar Thompson, do you think?
It fully depends on Holland's shot to me. Like if he develops into a perimeter shooter, not saying he's going to be lethal or anything like that, but I think you can definitely play him next to Assar. These two, it's tough. Like, I don't know if you necessarily need to pick between these two, just hoping and praying and just thinking about what each of them can be developmentally in the long term. But I don't think any of us think that Assar is magically going to turn into a plus 3-point shooter. We know Jaylen Duren isn't a 3-point shooter. So I think that you need to maybe choose between those two. Maybe Assar is your 6-man long term. I don't know if that's what he's going to be. But I don't know if Holland develops into like a 34, 35, 36, like I think you could definitely play him next to Assar. It's more like who's your big in that sense? Like what are you going to do there? Because you sort of have to make up for whatever Assar is.
Yeah, guys, I just think in general, YouTube users on it in the chat. So is Through Championship Drive, which is our guy, Lance. Just start right now classifying Assar Thompson in your head as a 4. All right. He cannot shoot the ball well enough or handle the ball well enough right now to play the 3. He definitely shouldn't be playing the 2. And he is strong. Okay. He was strong last season. You could not move him. If an offensive player was trying to post him up, they did not have much success with that. He's so athletic, he can recover, and he's so strong in his base that he wouldn't get moved all that often. He had a lot of success even against Giannis, who has height and strength, ideally, you might think, over Assar Thompson, but it didn't play out that way every single possession. So rumors are that he's even stronger now. He took this time off that he had to recover to also work on his strength and on his body. So if that's true, like you turn that up to 11, right? So just right now, think of Assar Thompson as a 4. And if he also hits, which as our chat is bringing up pretty comedically, I must say, I've been laughing at it on the stream. But you're not likely to hit on every single one of these draft picks. If Assar Thompson is a hit and if Ron Holland is a hit, I think it could work out just fine. I mean, you consider a guy that Assar Thompson was compared to very favorably during his draft process, and that's Andre Iguodala, right? Well, when you look at Andre Iguodala, he never in his career averaged more than 20 points per game. Andre Iguodala, for only 4 years of his career, and his career was a long time. He played for a long time, all right? He only for 4 seasons averaged more than 17 points per game. Assar Thompson, to be successful in that type of role, does not need to be a 20-point per game scorer or even a 15-point per game scorer. Chat's mentioning Sean Marion. I think that's a great one to bring up as well. Look at him as a forward, a combo forward who is extremely versatile defensively, can guard 1 through 5, which is insane, is a pretty good passer if he's not dribbling the ball, and is a very good play finisher. And if you could kind of mold him and shrink his role into that archetype, I guess, I think you're going to see his efficiency go up, and Pistons fans are really going to like having him on the team. Okay. But I don't see that in any way getting in the way or vice versa, Ron Holland getting in the way of Assar Thompson. And to your point with the shooting, we've talked about this on the podcast, but you can play a bad shooter and a non-shooter together if you stick three very good shooters next to them. The struggle is when you want to play two or three non-shooters, guys that you can completely ignore as a defense, guys that they're not going to put up the shot. And if they do, you don't have to care. Those guys last season were Assar Thompson, Jaylen Duren, Killian Hayes, James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley. That's just five right there. That's 1/3 of the roster. There were more of them as well. So that was the problem last year. Right now, Ron Holland can play with Jaylen Duren. Ron Holland can play with Assar Thompson. Assar Thompson can't play with Jaylen Duren and should not play with Jaylen Duren. Those are the things that we run into. So even right now, I hope we see a decent amount of Assar Thompson playing next to Ron Holland. I hope we see a decent amount of Ron Holland with Jaylen Duren. I'm not worried about it. They've got plenty of shooting.
And if it eventually is we're talking about, not all these guys are going to be here long term. You have to pay them. You can't fit everyone in. But if it is Ron Holland and Assar Thompson, who are your two of that group who stick around and are starting next to Cade eventually, like what we were just talking about with the blind resume, player A, player B, if it's Ron, who's lesser of a playmaker, questionable decision maker at this time, I really like Assar Thompson's potential as a secondary / tertiary playmaker. I mean, that was a big plus for him in his pre-draft as well. Definitely has some molding and work to do there, but I think he has good feel. He has good vision. Still needs to improve, but if you're giving some of that up with Holland, I think Assar could potentially make up for that portion too.
Absolutely. And I mean, long term, the question is still, I think, if you're viewing these guys in the vein of we want them to be a starter in the future, your choice is still Assar Thompson or Jaylen Duren, not both. You can make it work with both on the roster. If you expect both of them to be successes, then that's great. You can keep both of them, but one of them's going to have to come off the bench. So purely if you're trying to piece together a future starting five with the young players, probably about three young players, right? That's probably good odds. That'd be very, very successful, but more reasonable than all five. So let's say three young players on the roster, all being starters. Cade's going to be one of them. It's unlikely that it's both Assar and Duren. So now your choice is one of those two, or Ivy and Holland, and you can kind of piecemeal it out from there. I think just really quickly, Big Cheese brings up Assar Thompson's ball handling. Excuse me, sorry there, guys. As compared to Ron Holland, here's the question. So is Assar Thompson's ball handling really that weak compared to Holland? Maybe he's biased, but Assar's feel for the game and approach suggests that he can learn to be a solid ball handler. Really quickly, and I'll let you respond quickly as well, but I agree that one day he could become a better ball handler. Right now, it isn't. It's very high, it's loose, and if he gets pressure, YouTube user brings it up here, but if he gets pressure, he picks the ball up. If he drives into the lane, he picks the ball up too early. That's all skill stuff, so it absolutely can get worked on. It's just really, really tough to improve to a level where you can be trusted at the NBA level to handle the ball if you aren't already close to that when you enter it. So it's a tall task for him, but it's possible.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Assar's handle just looks a little more loose at this time compared to Ron's. Not saying that Ron is a great ball handler by any means. Yeah, it's just tough because we've been talking about you want to surround Cade with guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot. I think this roster is made up of a ton of guys who do two of the three, maybe even just one of the three at a high level. And you're banking on a lot of development. And like we've been talking about today, all these guys aren't going to be a key part of the future forever. So there comes a point where you have to choose one or the other. And I think development is really going to win out here. There's a long way to go in different things for a lot of them, but hopefully we at least see 1% of improvement stacked upon each other for some of these guys throughout this year. So hopefully we can have a better idea of what it looks like.
And here's the real tell with Assar Thompson versus Ron Holland in terms of that ball handling skill, because both of these guys are incredible athletes. Assar even more so than Ron Holland, but they're both very explosive, very fast, and very fluid athletes on the NBA floor. Put a ball in their hands, and Ron Holland still looks like it. If you get him in traffic, he doesn't just pick up the ball. He'll try and weave around you. His step back, his just all the movements that he does while dribbling the ball still look very fluid and very cohesive, even if the handle is loose, which it is, and why he turns over the ball a decent amount in the G League, not as much in Summer League, so maybe something to watch there. Assar Thompson, when he dribbles the ball, is very stiff. His hips are locked, his chest is up and also kind of locked in his upper back. It just doesn't look very natural for him. So that's kind of your tell right now. Assar Thompson's a much more mechanical ball handler than Ron Holland. That's why Ron Holland's a much better ball handler right now than Assar Thompson. Can he fix that? Who knows? I hope so. Let's get to this one. This was a voicemail from Evan talking about Jaylen Duren's defense.
Hi, Blake and Wes. It's me. It's Evan. I called in maybe a few weeks back from Calgary, Alberta, but I moved back to my hometown of London, Ontario, so that's where I'm calling you from today, because of course you need to know that. I have a question about Jaylen Duren. Who doesn't? We know he's not the best defender. He sometimes gets a little bit lost in space, turned around, ball watches occasionally. Other players don't seem to fear him at the rim at all. He does like the two-hand contest thing decently well, but it never seems to really throw anybody off. So my question, I guess, and it's for either of you, is if Jaylen Duren makes this miraculous turnaround defensively that everybody seems to think that he can make, and I'm speculative of that, but we'll leave that conversation for another day, how will we know? Like, what signs will there be that he has improved? I mean, like, non-statistical signs. Like, what will you see on the floor that would indicate to you that Jaylen Duren is a neutral to B plus defender? Like, what that he could show you would make you say, oh wow, he's turning it around? Just because I would like to know what signs to look for myself. So appreciate you guys taking the question. I might be a little long here, but anyway, go Pistons. Take care.
All right, Blake. So what do you think? Non-statistical signs that Jaylen Duren has turned a corner defensively.
So the biggest thing for me is his positioning. This isn't a Jaylen Duren thing, just a top of mind thing. Like in the Team USA's game today, there was a possession where USA was on defense and LeBron actually was the last line of defense, and he went to help on ball, double team, and he left like a guy wide open in the dunker spot, and it resulted in an easy 2 points from Serbia. So I think things like that you can look for. Like, is Jaylen Duren ball watching? Is he losing his man and making the incorrect decision in doing that? I thought, Wes, what you, Bryce, and Amari were talking about on the Pistons Pulse in terms of looking at Jaylen Duren's stock numbers is a good thing too. But non-statistically, like, the biggest thing for me is just where he puts himself on the floor, and maybe even like just where his eyes are looking, because when you're that last line of defense, it's like you're really the most important player on the court in most scenarios, especially in post settings. So if he goes away from his man and it just results in easy opportunities, I think that's something you can look for. But just making sure he keeps himself in that right position to help if he needs to, slide over and protect the rim, or just anticipate the next pass. You know that Jaylen Duren's already an elite rebounder, so we know he's going to crash the glass and everything like that. It's just, what does he do to impact the shot or make it as difficult as possible for the opposition, specifically when he is like that last line of defense anchoring the team, how he moves his feet. I know we talked about Jaylen Duren mention himself, like he just didn't really bring it on defense this year. So you can look at how hard he's playing, effort level and things like that. But I think it really is just an anticipation thing where he is on the floor and ultimately how he impacts the offensive or the opponent's like offensive possession from there. Hopefully he's altering shots and just making things as hard as possible for the other team.
I'd add a couple of really little things that he struggled with possession to possession last year. One, just pure activity. So if you, in the early season, Evan, if you want to watch Jaylen Duren off ball on defense, you want to see him being much more active. There were plenty of times last season where he's upright, not in a stance, not really seeming to take in what's happening in front of him and just reacting to everything instead of predicting what's about to happen. Like you mentioned, Blake, with watching his eyes to see what he's seeing. So that's something that he can work on. That's just him in his own head, bringing it like you mentioned there that he said. So you want to see more activity. The other thing that he really struggled with, and so YouTube user brings up playing drop coverage all the time was a problem, and it was, but that's not just a coaching thing. Jaylen Duren was a serial hands down defender. I mentioned just now that he wasn't always in a stance, so that was part of the problem too. But if you want to just watch him off ball, if he's playing drop coverage, which I think he's going to need to play, because I personally wouldn't trust him consistently to switch or consistently to hard hedge like that. So you want a guy who's athletic as he is in drop coverage in this instance, because he has so much vertical pop. You want his hands up or out. When you're playing in drop coverage, your arms need to be out so that you can play the passing lanes. You're essentially playing two at a time, right? The on-ball defender is going to go over the screen, so you're playing the roller, or if it's a short roller, you're playing that and the ball handler until the on-ball guy recovers. So you got to be low, hands out, and backpedaling, ready to react. He really struggled with that last season. So if he's in stance more often, if his hands are up and out much more often on defense, but especially in those drop coverage situations, I think that's going to be a really big thing for him and a little thing that you could watch for to hopefully find some improvement. Hopefully he's going to do those things. In terms of like effects that he could have on the court, it doesn't have to be blocked shots. So, talking about the drop coverage situations, if all of a sudden we start seeing more kickouts instead of attacking the big from the offense, right? If all of a sudden those pick and rolls don't end with as many rim finishes, but instead end with kickouts to the corners and some contested threes, that's a good sign that Jaylen Duren's being an impactful rim protector. If he's not, like you said, if he's not lost off ball, just kind of in a scatter action and recovering, if he's not lost and if he's able to rotate over from help to get those two-hand contests much more frequently than we saw last season, that's a really good sign for him as a rim protector. So I think there are a lot of these little things that will eventually, over the course of the season, build into more of an effect on the opposing offense. Because, look, even if he starts doing this right away, he's still going to get attacked. You've got 2 years plus his college tape to suggest that your guards, if you're the opposing team, you can attack this big. So even if he fixes all of this right now in game one and maintains it through the rest of the season, it's going to take some time for the effect to really show. So I would say my recommendation is, watch him off ball, right? Watch for hands up, in stance, activity, seeming to process everything and being predictive instead of reactive. And then over time, start to track those kickouts, those jump stop finishes instead of just inside hand or regular layups, those types of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, with bigs, I mean, a good thing to watch if you're trying to look to how good a guy is at impacting the game defensively, you can say the same thing offensive wise, but watching their hands and feet, I mean, I think just like what you were saying with activity, Wes, lends itself to that. Like, how well is Jaylen Duren moving off the ball? I mean, he looked dominant those first few games of the season, then dealt with ankle issues. We don't really know if anything like that lingered. We don't think it did. And even Jaylen Duren said he just needs to bring it a little bit more. So I think that's another thing you can look at too, just how he's moving his feet. I mean, again, like, he's going to grab rebounds and end the possession. It's just like, what else is he doing defensively besides that moving forward?
And I don't mean to say this as like a detrimental thing, but most of this stuff that I mentioned are things that players are taught from a very, very young age. And I only bring that up to just say, like we were talking about Assar Thompson improving his ball handling skill, right? Like, these are things for Jaylen Duren that are very ingrained into how he unconsciously plays the game of basketball. These are very foundational, basic habits that he doesn't have at the moment. So it's like with Assar Thompson becoming a better ball handler. It's a very, very big task for him. It's not impossible, but it's a big task to learn that as a 20, 21-year-old in the NBA. So, it's not, like I said, not impossible, but important to note that it is tough. This is another one from at Malu Viper 33. Do you think Ron Holland will be good at guarding point guards? I think that's a pretty good question here, especially in the context of his earlier question about fit with Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ron is versatile, so I think he can. I don't know how quickly he will. And I mean, you're talking about the NBA where the best players in the world are. There's definitely going to be lead guards that he's going to go up against that he's going to have a hard time staying in front of. I think that's normal, not a sign to panic or anything like that. But I think he eventually can. Like, I think he's versatile and athletic enough to develop into that. I just think where he is right now, he's very raw, and you might see him struggle, especially if like opposing guards try to go at him and everything like that. But I think we've seen that he has the enough defensive tools to make you think he can be a good defender one day. And then you pair that with everything he is as an athlete, how quick he is, how aggressive he can be. I definitely think it's possible. I'm just not sure how soon we'll see it.
Yeah, I'm still a little skeptical of Ron Holland becoming a great defender. Not a good defender. I think he'll get to that level. Good or solid is my expectation at this point, but great. His activity's awesome. I love his effort level. I love the energy that he plays with on that end. I'm not sure he has the athletic tools to check point guards 24/7, right? Outside of a pinch situation where he gets switched down onto one, or a guy's just really hot and you want to throw some size against him. I think he can handle those things. But in terms of for every minute that he's on the floor, I would be worried about him guarding really high caliber point guards. And yeah, YouTube user brings up Ron Holland's not close to Assar Thompson as a defensive prospect, and I absolutely agree. So again, this is probably an area where it actually does make sense to bring up the comparison of these two guys. We've talked previously about times where it doesn't, but in this case, I think it does, because Assar Thompson, as good of an athlete as Ron Holland is, Assar Thompson is, 1, 2, 3 times better. He can jump higher. He's a lot quicker laterally. He's faster in a straight line. Assar Thompson's just a incredibly, 1% level, 0.5% level athlete for the NBA, which is already some of the best athletes in the world. Ron Holland's, maybe 85 to 90%. He's still incredible. I should say 5 to 10% based on what I did earlier. So top 5, top 10% type of athlete. I think Ron Holland is. So in terms of physical tools, Assar Thompson definitely has more. But I'd say on top of that, Assar Thompson is seemed to be, even at OTE, much more naturally gifted at kind of intuiting where a ball handler wants to go, and reading body language in that way to predict the guy he's guarding. Whereas Ron Holland, even in the G League, seemed a little bit more reactive. He did get burned on ball quite a bit. He got burned off ball a little bit. Off ball, that feels more like a focus thing, and it's fine. He's still really young. But on ball, he's definitely locked in more often than he's not. So I just think Assar's got more tools, and I worry about Ron Holland becoming really, truly a plus on defense, especially if we're thinking he's going to be this bucket getter, which you and I agree that he will. So, yeah, point guards, I'm skeptical. Twos, though, I think he can handle that. Oh, I also worry about him chasing screens. Sorry to cut you off there. I think he's going to get lost on those, and that'll be a long-term issue.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, if let's say the 3 remaining in the starting lineup from the current young group are Cade, Holland, and Assar, who do you like? And the Pistons are playing the Mavericks. Like, who do you give the Luka assignment to? Like, do you give it to Assar? Like, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Assar Thompson's guarding Luka. I mean, I think at that point,
can Ron guard Kyrie in that situation? Like, what do you do?
I would, if this is our scenario, I would put Ron on Kyrie. I just would not be happy about it. Yeah. And Kyrie's going to go off for a lot of points, but Luka Doncic is the bigger concern. Luka's going to tear up anybody. Ron's your best, or not Ron, Assar's your best shot. So, yeah, they're just an impossible matchup without a guard defender.
Yeah, it probably wasn't the best example, but yeah, I think like that's a benefit of having Assar and Holland to play next to each other, and then like you just have Cade take the shooter in the corner or whatever it is. So yeah, I think if it is Assar who sticks around, he can make up a bit for whatever Ron turns into be, what he's growing into be, and hopefully he does at least develop into like a good defender eventually.
I will say in that specific scenario, could be fun if we get a little creative to stick Jaylen Ivey on Kyrie Irving and just tell him to press up, chase tight, like don't bother helping, don't bother focusing on anyone else. You just stare at Kyrie Irving for 36 minutes or however many minutes he's going to play. Ivy's going to get burned a lot, but maybe it makes Kyrie tired, and maybe Ron Holland can block some shots. Or maybe Jaylen Duren can block some shots too. But that might be the creative answer. Just tell Jaylen Ivey to dog him and understand that Kyrie's going to win, but maybe you tire him out.
Yeah, it's a tough assignment. Like, that's why I almost wish I picked like Boston or something to see what we would do. But no, I mean, either way, I think putting Assar out there in general, like you have him really on the court right now to hopefully take that top defensive assignment and give you a little bit of juice, like whatever he is on offense. So yeah, eventually, I mean, I think he can be pretty invaluable to have next to Cade and Ron in this scenario too.
Yeah, absolutely. This will be our last question for the show. This is from our guy Rames in the DBB comments. What prediction do you have for that last open roster spot and how it's going to be used? Is it going to be a trade, marginal signing, just kind of carried open into the season? What do you think?
I meant to look this up before the show, but didn't like a couple years ago the Pistons went into the season with that last roster spot open?
Yeah, they did.
Okay. I mean, I think that is possible. I mean, it leaves you flexible for trades to take back more players than you're giving up and everything. I mean, some of the free agent names that are still out there are interesting, but I don't know if you're bringing one in and you're like, this player is definitely someone that you have to find minutes for. I mean, I don't know if this is how you use the roster spot either, but a big that has more size than the few bigs that are on the rosters right now would be nice to stick on the end of the bench and use in case of injuries or wherever you need spot minutes. But I don't know. Like the longer we're waiting, I think they might just roll it into the season, see what happens from there. Maybe there's a in-season signing they can make, or like I'm sure they're going to make some sort of in-season trade. So it leaves them a little bit of flexibility from a roster spot perspective. But that said, now that I said that, they're probably going to go and sign someone like next week. So.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's absolutely a argument for keeping the flexibility, especially when you look at this roster. There are guys like THJ, Malik Beasley that you could see being fairly highly sought after trade deadline acquisitions. So maybe for a Malik Beasley, you can take back 2 young players, right? Instead of just a young player in a second, if that's more interesting. So it does let you play around a little bit like that. There is a restriction, I believe, that comes with that. I don't think you have access to the third two-way slot if you don't have a full roster. However, with those two-way guys, if you think about it as just getting to the trade deadline, you can get to the trade deadline using up all of the NBA minutes for both of those two-way guys if you do it correctly. So practically right now they have 16 guys on this roster, I believe, if we're going to include those two guys filling in jointly that 15th spot. So I do think that's absolutely something that they could do. My money would be either on that or a free agent signing. It seems like a lot of the movements just died down in terms of trades. I mean, I think just the other day we saw Woj talking about how Ingram is just expected to start off the season with the Pelicans. So there are, and Lauri Markkanen, there's no more big moves. So it seems like we might just be where we're at least for now. That said, things can always change. Bojan Bogdanovic was a late surprise trade that happened that year. So, maybe that happens. If you're looking for free agents, though, to fill it, some guys that I like for it, Doug McDermott, just get another wing shooter. Moses Brown, there's your big with size, even though he's not thick, he's tall and he's pretty athletic. Pokuševski, I don't know, just kind of a swing. He's going to get a lot of G League minutes. The same for Usman Garuba, who was a guy, by the way, I really liked in that draft coming out of Spain. He's not panned out at all how I thought he might have, but that wouldn't be one if you want to take a young swing. And then maybe an interesting one, Dylan Windler. He's got some familiarity with JB and the systems and terminology that he brings offensively and defensively. Maybe that's a vet guy. I think he's 28 now, 27 or 28. So maybe that's a guy you could pull in as that 15th man. Not really expect him to play outside of injuries, but if he does, he's a good shooter. At the expectation level, he's a good practice body who can be a good vet for these young guys.
Yeah, and what YouTube user brought up here, like Wes, you brought it up too. I think I heard Zach Lowe talking about it, that a lot of teams were waiting to see what was going to happen with Lauri Markkanen, and that caused somewhat of a stalemate. So I don't know if now that he signed the extension in Utah and can't be traded, that we might see a few more signings trickle in. So I don't know. I think it's nice to just keep the spot open for now to just see what happens, see who's available on the market. And if someone's intriguing, you think can help the team now, or that you can take a flyer on and develop, like bring them in for a minimum. It's not going to hurt by any means. And also like with like Wendell Moore, I haven't really heard much of it. As of now, I'm sure we're expecting him to be on the roster, but maybe like that spot is sort of flexible too, because the Pistons really just took on his money to move up in the draft, and he doesn't make much and is on an expiring, I believe. So I think you'd be fine like letting something like that go. So we'll see. I mean, a lot of things can happen. Poku actually like signed a contract overseas. I don't even like, I'm sure if there was an NBA
Oh, my
deal,
bad. I missed that.
no, it's okay. I was just gonna ask if you knew, like, if he were to say the Pistons were to offer him a minimum, like if he could even do it, because I don't really know how that works. I'm sure there's some like NBA clause that if he wants there to
Yeah,
be.
no idea, but bummer. I like Poku was an interesting name back in the day. That's a really deep DBB cut. You guys, your listeners out there, Poku's a deep DBB comments cut from that COVID year.
Yeah, I like Poku. I'm very upset he hasn't panned out yet. You never know what can happen, but if he is truly like gonna stay overseas, like I'm sure he has a long career ahead of him, making a good amount of money over there, and I'm sure he'll play pretty well too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with most of these guys, they're gonna if they're on the fringe of the NBA, they can probably find a home overseas if they want it. So, YouTube user says that most overseas contracts, have NBA outs. Can't confirm it, but taking your word for it. So, assuming that that's true, I'm sure there's a way to get Poku into Detroit if Langdon really, really wanted to. But
that feels like a Troy Weaver move, by the way. Like if Troy,
it kind of does.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'll be interested to see.
I don't know. Is Poku too skilled of a center for Troy Weaver?
Oh man, I'll be interested to see if Langdon decides to take any flyers. I mean, especially if they're low risk ones, I don't see any reason not to. But yeah, you don't want to take up a ton of roster spots and like minutes from projects like that we've seen burn the Pistons in recent years.
Yeah, and final thought here, I'll let you respond, and then we'll need to get out of here. Let all you guys go watch that thrilling, I'm sure, Lions preseason game that'll start
Hendon
up not too long from now. Hendon Hooker, is he going to get all the minutes? Okay, cool. That'll be fun.
I saw that online. I don't know. I'm not paying.
Okay, I'll tune in for the kicker, whatever that guy's name is from the Panthers. That's my storyline for the evening. I'm rooting for the guy. But anyway, outside of that, final thought here with the roster. I think you're right when you bring up that at this point, for the Pistons specifically being a bad team or a team that projects to be pretty bad, I think we're now out of the guys that could come in and get minutes, like you said. Yeah. So I would not expect a Markelle Fultz. I would not expect even a DSJ, guys like that at this point in the offseason. Those guys are going to be taking cheap deals for far better teams than Detroit. So I think now if they sign a free agent, you're looking at veteran leadership or young guy swing on a bust who might still have something to give.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, if you're making a move to make the roster better now, I think it's just totally a depth situation, someone that's on the end of the bench to play when you need, when there are injuries, and that's that. But I will go ahead and close us out. Thank you.
Hang on, YouTube user says carrying 4 centers would be a Troy Weaver move. I would agree if Jaylen Duren and Isaiah Stewart weren't injured for almost half of last season. I think it's possible both of those guys are hurt at the same time and you're just dying for a backup.
Oh man, and Killian Hayes on his Exhibit 10 contract too.
Don't put that evil on me.
Yeah, if he was brought back to Detroit ever, that would wreak some havoc. So that will
French Revolution, baby. Here we come.
Oh man, but I will go ahead and close us out. Thank you everyone for joining us live. Reminder to please like the stream if you're watching us live on YouTube. Subscribe to the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel if you haven't already. Really helps us push things along. Ashton, the trainer, in the chat with the Detroit basketball. We appreciate you joining as always. Reminder, everyone can call our phone line and ask a question to hear your voice on the show. The phone number for that is 313-355-2717. And special thanks to our guy, Sean Corp, the managing editor at Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys again for all the great questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.